So let's begin with Saturn. What I'm about to share isn't a scientific claim. It's a symbolic interpretation. I'm not saying Saturn is watching us or that there is literally an eye beneath the cube. But before I continue, welcome to Starwell Astrology. My name is Shari, and I'm a Western tropical astrologer with a very special interest in shadow work, astrotheology, and esoteric mysticism. If this kind of symbolic decoding resonates with you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. I also host a free live shadow work circle every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, which is 4 p.m. Pacific. And if you want to join, just send an email to starwellastro@gmail.com. Also, I'd like to remind you that I do offer private natal chart readings and one-on-one shadow work coaching. My information is below. So with Saturn, what I'm saying is that these planetary features reflect something deeply psychic, archetypical, and real within us. The hexagon, the cube, the eye, these are not just symbols of space. They are blueprints of the soul. We find them in sacred geometry, in esoteric architecture, and in the alchemical maps of inner transformation. So instead of asking, is this real? Ask, what is it revealing about my soul, about my karma, about the simulation we're moving through? So at Saturn's North Pole, we find one of the most astonishing features in the entire solar system, a mathematically perfect six-sided storm. And this creates a Saturnian hexagon. The hexagon shape is the cube. And as I've discussed in my previous video, this cube is extremely important because it can unfold into the cross. And the cube also contains the inner light within us, our black sun. So if you're interested in more on that specific symbology, as well as the glyph of Saturn, you can check out my previous video. But in this video, we're going to speak more about these anomalies that seem to appear on the surface of the planet Saturn. So there's a literal atmospheric structure that's discovered through satellite imaging, and it has remained stable for decades, maybe even centuries. So this seems to be more than weather. It's like geometry speaking. It's architecture in motion, a living symbol expressed through planetary form. Incidentally, in sacred geometry, the hexagon is not random, it's foundational. It's also the two-dimensional shadow of a cube. And this hexagon appears everywhere. It's life organizing. It's in crystals, it's in carbon molecules, it's in beehives. It also mirrors the flower of life and countless creation mandalas. So when Saturn expresses a hexagon at its north pole, we're witnessing a projection of structure itself, a blueprint of form speaking through matter. In astrology, Saturn governs boundaries, discipline, structure, karma, and time. And it's the scaffolding of incarnation. Saturn is the architect of form. So the hexagon is not just a shape, it's literally representing the archetype of Saturn's glyph moving through space. And therefore, it's a living symbol of form. It behaves like a scalar imprint, broadcasting the laws of form into the field of reality. The hexagon functions like a toroidal stabilizer, projecting templates of reality, encoding order, and reinforcing the architecture of karma. Through this symbolic lens, Saturn's North Pole is a broadcast portal. The hexagon is the carrier wave, and the cube is the template encoded within the broadcast. So from the Oversoul perspective, the hexagon is the gateway through which karmic law takes form. It does not punish, it stabilizes. It's not about judgment, it's about the frequency we reflect. And this is where Saturn shifts from cosmic warden into initiator. So the question isn't whether Saturn controls us. The question is, what are we broadcasting into the structure that Saturn reflects back to us? So let's talk about Saturn's rings briefly. Saturn's rings behave symbolically like karmic memory disks reflecting unintegrated patterns while also amplifying the coherent ones. The ring is like a mirror, and what is unresolved echoes within them. And what is integrated gets amplified. When we look at the hexagon, we're seeing the geometry beneath the rings, the template behind the looping karma. The rings show where we're looping, and the cube reveals what those loops have constructed inside of us. So the ancient question returns, is the cube a temple or is it a trap? The Black cube is found across cultures, from Mecca to Manhattan Plaza, and also throughout Europe. Its presence is universal. Some see this as sinister, but in its original meaning, the cube was considered a sacred structure, the container of the divine. In ancient traditions, the cube was revered as the container of God, the Ark of the Covenant, and the Holy of Holies, also the foundation stone of temples. But in the modern age, its meaning became inverted, and many now interpret these cubes as anchors of material consciousness embedded in the ley lines, Earth's grid, reinforcing a frequency of consumption, identity, and external validation. Now, these structures don't literally imprison us physically, but they do hold the vibration that cause us to become forgetful. When the soul is unconscious, the cube becomes the loop, and it becomes a mirror that traps our repetitive behavior, and we forget the temple within. We externalize power. We see our power in others, in systems, in leaders, in money, in status. But the cube can always be reclaimed. We don't need to destroy the cube. We change what fills it. Just briefly, I want to mention that when I do use the word simulation, I'm not referring to an artificial hologram, machine-generated reality, or some kind of alien construct. I'm pointing to a sacred intelligent mirror, a perceptual matrix that adjusts itself to the coherence, distortions, and emotional truth within the soul. So the simulation is not artificial, or is it fake? It's symbolic and it's responsive. What we perceive is filtered through our internal state. And this is also through collective and ancestral fields that interact with our personal karma. And shadow work reprograms the simulation from within. As we integrate, the inner mirror becomes clearer, and the timeline we become aligned in is more harmonious. So until the inner eye awakens, we repeat the same karmic loop. We might feel trapped in our repeated experiences until our perceptions have shifted. Now, the cube appears to offer stability, permanence, safety, identity, ownership. And today we measure success by cubic structures, from our office, our home, vaults, even the black box we hold in our hands, our cell phones. Now, the cubes aren't inherently dark, but they do stabilize separation consciousness until we do the inner work to harmonize within ourselves and alchemize from within. Until then, it keeps the grid anchored in the third dimension survivalism. It's not the cube itself, it's a frequency encoded into it that has been inverted. So the cube began as a sacred architecture, a template, a containment, an arc of resonance, a chamber of inner light. When we self-witness and reclaim inner worth, the cube shifts into resonance, becoming an initiatory container instead of a trap. It no longer imprisons, it initiates. So Saturn always teaches in dual form. And when form is honored as a vessel, the cube becomes a temple. When form is mistaken for source, it becomes a prison. And this is the moment of shadow inversion. When integrated, the cube unfolds into the cross, the geometry of ego death, resurrection, and ascension. And the body becomes the living temple, the vessel of Shekinah or Shekinah, which is the indwelling divine presence. And the black cube marks the Nigredo chamber, the initiation where the ego dissolves and the black sun awakens. So the black cube is a Saturnian construct, a container of karma, time, and soul refinement. But the cube does not open itself. It opens when pierced by conscious will and emotional truths. We cannot ascend by wanting freedom. We ascend by descending into the chamber, meeting what we've avoided and alchemizing it. Only then does Saturn's gate open, not because it's locked, but because we were unready. So this is the shadow work I do, the deepest form of soul work. It doesn't end at labeling or psychological insight, because we can have many insights about what our wounds are, but until we know how to heal, metabolize, and alchemize them, they still just remain as information that we know about ourselves. So we must enter our fragmented wounds. We must feel them fully, and we must hold them long enough for the story to dissolve. And this is how unconscious loops break. We break the cycle by becoming conscious participants instead of automatically reacting to our lives. And this is the moment where the karmic wheel begins to bend. We reclaim our fragmented power and our wounded memories, and we return to our original design that has been scattered across lifetimes. We dissolve identity shaped by survival, and we meet the self that remembers its light. This is not psychological shadow work, it's alchemical initiation. So Saturn's cube never opens through admiration or avoidance. It opens when we witness and feel what we've suppressed for lifetimes. And shadow work turns the eye inward, the only direction where truth is ever found. So now let's take another look at the hexagon. We might see it as a geometric seal, the union of opposing forces, two interlocking triangles. The upward triangle represents the masculine solar energy, representing fire, air principles, and the downward feminine triangle represents the lunar earth and water principles. Together they form the hexagram, the seal of Solomon, and the symbol of the alchemical union. In alchemy, it marks the marriage of oppositions. In Kabbalah, the bridge between worlds, as above, so below. Saturn is a tester, binding opposites until inner union is achieved. And the hexagon becomes a vibrational emblem of the locked gate of duality, the place where the soul confronts its own division and split. So this is the gate of initiation. The masculine and feminine must have its alchemical wedding. And to do this, they must orbit before they can merge in coherence. Saturn will teach us that ascension is not escape from duality. It's a union of these poles within the soul. So speaking of unions of poles, let's talk about Saturn's south pole. Astronomers have found a colossal spiraling vortex that is shaped unmistakably like an eye. Unlike the rigid geometric hexagon of the North Pole, the South Pole is fluid, organic, and almost biological. A storm that looks eerily like an eye socket, especially in infrared. So from an esoteric point of view, this isn't just weather. It could be seen as symbolic architecture. Saturn becomes the all-seeing eye, the cosmic witness. So Saturn governs karma, memory, time, and structure. And mythologically, he is the one who records what the soul carries across lifetimes. He is the karmic scribe of the threshold. So the storm eye mirrors the optic thalamus, the inner eye, the seat of the witness self. So the real question becomes, what is the eye of Saturn actually witnessing? It functions like an archetypical aperture, a mirror revealing what is unresolved, unseen, and unclaimed within the soul. And when the North Pole projects geometry and structure, the South Pole receives and records. One transmits form and the other orbits memory. So Saturn watches what the ego hides. In esoteric tradition, our souls enter the matrix through Cancer, which is ruled by the moon, and the moon retains the soul's memory. And Capricorn is the gate we leave through when we die. We meet Saturn, the Grim Reaper, who evaluates the soul to see what remains unintegrated and to determine whether or not we've managed to resolve our karmic wounds or if we must reincarnate and face them again. So the eye symbolizes the place where the emotional truth, karmic residue, and the shadow memories surface to be witnessed. So this eye echoes many archetypes, and Saturn behaves like the toroidal initiatory gate. And from an inverted perspective, this eye becomes the false observer, the matrix mind, the AI eye, the internalized critic that watches through shame and fear and survival conditioning. When reclaimed, this eye becomes the eye of the monad, pure witnessing without judgment. The black cube is the throne of form, and the eye is the witness of that form. And together they initiate the soul through limitation into remembrance. So we might say that the eye of Saturn is not just a storm, but a symbol of alchemical memory embedded in the soul. For ages, we've feared this eye as the devouring gaze of Kronos, the stern face of karma, time, and control. But something is shifting. Today, the eye at Saturn's South Pole can be read differently. Saturn's archetype through the observation of this eye is no longer being reflected as judgment or punishment, but as awakening, as we also move into the age of Aquarius, where Saturn is the co-ruler of Aquarius along with Uranus. So this makes sense as far as us entering this new age, where now we're seeing Saturn less as the stern, harsh taskmaster who keeps us under his rigid laws and control, and where Saturn instead becomes the initiatory gate for awakening. So through this awakening, we no longer feel like we're under surveillance from this all-seeing eye, and instead, as souls, we're remembering. And this spiraling pupil in the dark reminds us that time is not linear. It moves in cycles, in spirals. And karma is not condemnation. It is repetition seeking resolution. And the eye that once judged is now returning as the eye that sees with love. And to walk the path of the soul's maturity is to stop fearing the eye and to become it. And when we reclaim this eye from Kronos and return it to the monad, we stop living as beings watched by fate and start living as beings who witness ourselves. We are not being watched, we're being remembered. And as we remember ourselves, we remember our original light behind the eye, the place where form dissolves, time softens, and the soul recognizes itself again. So thank you for joining me. And if this kind of symbolic decoding resonates with you in any way, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget that I do host a free live shadow work circle every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, which is 4 p.m. Pacific. And if you would like to join, just send an email to starwellastro@gmail.com. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next time.